I've been there more times than I care to admit, scrolling through glossy product pages, seeing a sleek 14-inch machine that promises gaming-grade performance, only to end up with a laptop that chokes on a single title or overheats after 10 minutes. It's that gut-wrenching moment when the excitement of a new build turns into buyer's remorse because the real-world experience just doesn't match the hype. That's why I'm doing this deep dive on the Lenovo ThinkPad P14s Copilot Plus mobile workstation, because it sits right at the intersection of portable productivity and the kind of sustained graphics power some gamers crave. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's set the stage. The P14s Copilot Plus isn't marketed as a gaming laptop in the traditional sense. You won't see the roaring RGB lighting or a dedicated RTX beast inside. What you do get is an AMD Ryzen AI 7 Pro 350, an 8-core CPU with AI-boosted multitasking, and up to 64GB of DDR5 RAM. Pair that with a 2TB SSD and a 14-inch FHD plus IPS touchscreen, and you have a machine that's meant to handle heavy workloads, from 3D rendering to AI-assisted video editing, while still being light enough to slip into a backpack. So, who should actually consider buying this thing? If you're a professional who spends a good chunk of the day in CAD, Blender, or Adobe Suite and you also like to unwind with the occasional demanding game, think Cyberpunk 2077 at medium settings or Elden Ring with a modest frame rate, this laptop could be a sweet spot. The AI-enabled processor shines when you're juggling multiple heavy applications. I tested it by running Photoshop, a virtual machine, and a game of Valorant simultaneously, and the system kept the frame rate steady around 55 frames per second while the UI stayed responsive. The 64GB of DDR5 isn't just a marketing number, it actually allowed me to keep a 40GB Unreal Engine project open while compiling code in the background without any noticeable lag. If, however, you're a hardcore gamer who expects ultra-high settings, 144Hz refresh rates, and a cooling system that can survive marathon sessions without whining, you'll probably want to look elsewhere. The P14s uses the integrated Radeon graphics that come with the Ryzen AI 7 Pro chip. In real-world testing, that GPU held up well for indie titles and older AAA games at 1080p, but once you crank up Red Dead Redemption 2 to high settings, you'll see frame rates dip into the low 30s and the fans start to spin up noticeably. The laptop does have a decent heat pipe layout, but because the chassis is designed for thin and light portability, you'll hear a low hum under sustained load, especially when the CPU is doing AI inference tasks. Speaking of heat, let's talk about thermal performance. The chassis is a classic ThinkPad slab, matte black, minimal lines, and a sturdy magnesium alloy frame. The cooling solution uses a dual-fan design with heat pipe contacts directly over the CPU. In a 30-minute gaming session, the CPU stayed around 85°C, which is high but within safe limits. The fan noise rose to a moderate level. You'd definitely notice it in a quiet room, but it never became an outright distraction. For long coding or video editing sessions where the CPU is under constant load, I found the temperature to creep a little higher after an hour, hitting the low 90s. It's not a deal-breaker for most professional workflows, but it's something to keep in mind if you plan to push the machine for many hours without a break. Battery life is another practical concern. Lenovo quotes around 8-hour mixed usage, and that's roughly what I saw. I ran a loop of 30 minutes of Photoshop, 30 minutes of light gaming, and some browsing, and the battery dropped from 100% to about 55% after 3 hours. When you add the high-performance CPU and the bright IPS screen, you can't expect a full day of heavy gaming on the go. If you need all-day unplugged performance for intensive tasks, you'll either have to carry a spare charger or consider a larger capacity model. The display itself deserves a closer look. The 14-inch FHD plus IPS panel delivers 1920x1200 resolution, which gives you a bit more vertical real estate than a standard 1080p screen. Color accuracy is decent out of the box. I measured a delta E in the mid-single digits, which is acceptable for most content creators. The touchscreen adds a nice layer of flexibility. I used it for sketching in Krita and for navigating Windows 11's new gestures. However, the refresh rate is locked at 60 Hz, so you won't get that buttery smoothness you find on gaming-focused panels. If you're after a high refresh, low response display for competitive shooters, the P14s isn't built for that. Port connectivity is where the ThinkPad lineage shines. Two Thunderbolt 4/USB 4C ports give you fast data transfer, external GPU support, and power delivery, while a full-size HDMI 2.1 lets you hook up a 4K monitor without adapters. I plugged in a 1440p external display and ran a 3-monitor setup for a day of CAD work. Everything stayed crisp and the latency was negligible. The presence of Wi-Fi 7 is future-proof, though real-world speeds are still limited by the router you have at home.